So guys, before the dev server was closed, I actually tested the performance a little bit with the new flight model of the Eurofighter against some of the aircraft that we already have in the game to compare it to and to prove to you why the 14.0 BR is the correct BR for the aircraft. So let's get going. Like I always do, I do these tests in the same map for all the vehicles in the same conditions. Empty, almost empty, like fuel tanks, minimal fuel, right, and no loadouts. Okay, so the situations are basically the same. The only thing that will matter is the performance of the aircraft. And of course, here we are not testing too much of the turning capability. It's more the acceleration, the max speed, not max speed, but like stuff with the performance, with the engines and drag and weight and everything with that, right? So I tested the Eurofighter against the F-15E, F-16C, Gripen, J-10, and Su-27, SM of course, and I will be testing that with the Rafale as well, probably tomorrow, okay? So let's start with the weight, to compare the aircraft a little bit to see how heavy the Eurofighter is. So the Eurofighter has a 12.9 tons, the F-15E 17.2, the F-16C 10.2, the Gripen 7.6, the J-10 9.4, and the Su-27 has an incredible 19.8. So we can clearly see that the Eurofighter isn't the heaviest thing ever, but it's not as light as the Gripen or even the J-10, right? Or even the F-16. But it's a lot lighter than the F-15 and Su-27, and that was expected. It is in the between the middle there, being kind of a light fighter, but not as light as the Gripen and some others, right? In the thrust, these were measured in optimal conditions for those engines. So there are engines that produce more power in the high end, some in the low end. So I tested it in optimal conditions for each of these engines, and I recorded the thrust weight and the amount of thrust that these engines are producing together in one calculation. So for example, the Eurofighter, the two Eurojets produce together 228 kilonewtons in optimal conditions, the F-15E 342, so although it's a lot heavier, has a lot more power, the F-15C 164, a lot lighter, so it has a lot less weight and it's okay. 101 kilonewtons for the Gripen, 157 kilonewtons for the J-10, which is pretty good. And the Su-27, although it is a lot heavier, almost twice as much as the Eurofighter, it produces basically only 70 kilonewtons more, with 304 kilonewtons in those engines. So meaning that although some of these aircraft are a lot lighter or a lot heavier, the thrust weight will eventually dictate how the acceleration will become. But it's not the only thing. Like I'm going to explain later, drag takes a very, very big part of the performance sometimes. But yeah, thrust to weight, doesn't matter the weight, it doesn't matter the thrust. The thrust to weight ratio is where we can actually compare all of them, right? So the Eurofighter has a 1.76 thrust to weight ratio. The F-15 has a 1.98, so even though it weighs a lot, it has 17 tons of weight, it produces so much power that in minimal fuel conditions and stuff, it can get to almost 2.0, you know, in the thrust to weight. And this is after the nerf that the F-15E got. Imagine before, right? So it's incredible. Yesterday, like the days prior, the Eurofighter was even better, but they basically nerfed a little bit of the high-end tops, like power of these engines, right? The F-16C has a 1.58, so worse than the Eurofighter and a lot worse than the F-15E. The Gripen 1.18, so it doesn't produce a lot of power, although it is very light, which means that it has a very low thrust to weight. Not very good, but yeah, after that nerf back then when they added, the Gripen kind of became that, right? Not so good in terms of thrust to weight. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know if it was it thrust that they changed? I don't remember. It doesn't matter. It has kind of a bad thrust weight, the worst of them all over here. The J-10, 1.68. So the J-10, like I said in the previous videos during the week, the J-10 is one of the closest aircraft that we had compared to the Eurofighter and the Rafale, right? There are aircraft that are just very similar in design choices, and the power to weight is very, very similar. That's why the J-10 is one of the most dangerous aircraft we can have, because in the future they will have better engines, better radars and everything, and it will be on par with the Eurofighters and stuff, which is crazy. But yeah, the J-10 is an amazing aircraft. The Su-27 had a 1.55, so a lot better than the Gripen, and amazingly almost the same as the F-16C, right? So it doesn't produce a lot more power than the weight that he has, so he loses for the F-15E by quite a lot, and he loses for the Eurofighter by some margin, but it's not that bad because it's basically on par with the F-16C, which is still amazing. I just think that the Gripen is the one that suffers the most here because of that, right? And then we go for the acceleration tests. We did basically a time trial of certain, situations. So from 0 throttle on the airfield to Mach 1 acceleration, the Mach 1 to Mach 1.5 acceleration at 5 kilometers altitude, and Mach 1.5 to Mach 2 acceleration at 10 kilometers altitude. So we start with the 0 to Mach 1. The Eurofighter did 32 seconds against the 30.3 of the F-15E. So worse than the F-15E because of the thrust weight there, but not by a lot. I imagine it because of the amount of drag that the F-15 has, right? The F-16 was 35, so worse, but not a lot as well. The Gripen has very bad 42 seconds, so, 1/4 more, 1/3 more, I don't know. And the J-10, 36 seconds, almost together with the F-15C, and the Su-27, 38 seconds, probably because of the drag, even though he's a very, very similar thrust weight than the together with the F-16C, right? From Mach 1 to Mach 1.5 is where I think it was kind of fun. The Eurofighter did in 22.5 seconds, which is nuts. It's incredible. The F-15E did in 27, so that's where I think the drag comes in, The F-15E has so much drag that even though it has a much better thrust weight, it loses by a lot against the Eurofighter. So the Eurofighter really, between Mach 1 plus, it's amazing in acceleration, better than anything else in the game, right? The F-16 has a 35 seconds, so pretty much the same, a lot worse than the Eurofighter. Gripen 44 seconds, twice as much, so a lot worse. 48 seconds for the J-10, more than twice, so a lot worse as well. And the Su-27, 52 seconds. So you can already see why they are adding these aircraft to 14.0, man. It accelerates to Mach 1.5 from Mach 1 in 22 seconds. And all of them, except the F-15E and a little bit of the F-16C, all of the other aircraft just are more than twice or twice as much time. So yeah, the Eurofighter is incredibly fast at these speeds, really, really good. From Mach 1.5 to Mach 2, 10 kilometers altitude, they did a 41.5, a lot worse than the F-15E. I think it's the way that it's designed, and probably loses power and stuff. 33 seconds for the F-15E, 1 minute and 50 against the F-15C. Gripen more than 2 minutes, and it didn't barely manage to Mach 1.9. The J-10, 1 minute and 7 seconds, and the Su-27, 1 minute and 10 seconds. So you can clearly see here again, guys, that although the Eurofighter is worse than the F-15E, they are on their class of their own. They have so much power, so much, thrust weight that they are in another level of aircraft. And that's why they are adding these aircraft 14.0, because they do have the same weapons as other aircraft. The main difference here, it's the performance. The radars are pretty much the same. The radar of the Eurofighter is amazing as well and stuff, but what really matters between the F-15E and the Eurofighter, even the Rafale that I'm going to talk about in another video, against the other aircraft that we already have in the game at 13.7, is the performance. Everything else is very similar, but these aircraft, or the F-15E, accelerates so much more than everything else, or the Eurofighter is a mix between accelerating more than anything else and then turning more than anything else combined. So it's just nuts. It really is nuts, and that's why the the F-15E, sorry, and the Eurofighter and the Rafale are gonna be 14.0, and I completely agree with it. It decompresses a little bit even, so it's great. And for the nations that don't have anything there, just wait a little bit. Russia will probably receive something there very quickly. Japan, I would assume that it will get the F2 very soon, so yeah, we just need to wait a little bit more. But it's incredible how much performance the Eurofighter has, especially at those Mach 1 to 1.5 accelerations. It's just nuts. Nothing in the game compares it to, even after the nerf. But yeah, basically this is it. Let me know in the comments what you think about the performance of the Eurofighter. See you guys on the next one. Make sure to subscribe, and bye. See ya.